Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to the India Conference at Harvard 2022. Our session for today is Powering India's Energy Infrastructure. I'm Piyush Verma, a mid-career Master's in Public Administration candidate at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the India Conference at Harvard is co-hosted by both undergraduate and graduate students of Harvard University. We have a strong legacy of bringing together eminent leaders, distinguished thinkers, renowned experts, and practitioners across government, business, and civil society to enlighten and illuminate us regarding the most crucial matters and affairs facing India. Before starting today's discussion, I would like to briefly go over some important housekeeping items. We'll kickstart the discussion with opening remarks from our respected panelists and moderator. Their conversation will go on for about 45 minutes, following which we will open the session up to audience Q&A. We value our audience engagement more than anything, and we hope you will use this time to further probe the arguments made by our speakers. Please use the Q&A function you see on your screen to post your questions. You will have an opportunity to upvote questions, and we encourage you to utilize this function if you spot your questions, as opposed to re-entering it separately. Upvoted questions will appear on the top of the pile and will be presented to the panelists by the moderator. We respect and acknowledge the fact that there will be differences in perspectives, but we humbly request our participants to kindly keep the comments and questions respectful and civil, such that we can all learn and grow from each other's ideas. We also request you to please tag us and use the hashtag ICH2022 to tweet and share your favorite quotes, insights, and moments from our panel. Now, without much further ado, I will introduce our panelists for the day. First of all, I would like to invite our Honorable Minister, Shri A.K. Singh ji. Shri A.K. Singh is the Cabinet Minister for the Ministry of Power and New and Renewable Energy. Shri Singh is Member of Parliament from Ara, Bihar. As Minister of Power and New and Renewable Energy, Shri Singh has implemented world's largest program for providing universal access electricity, and he has connected more than 18,000 villages and more than 28 million households with electricity within a span of only 1.5 years. His term as Power and New and Renewable Energy Minister has also been marked by establishing grid connectivity throughout India under One India, One Grid initiative. Shri Singh has been able to catalyze India's renewable energy growth, making the country a world leader in energy transition. Under his leadership, India achieved 40% of its installed capacity from non-fossil fuel sources in November 2021, which is well 9 years ahead of the target year committed during COP21. Shri Singh is now steering India's energy transition journey to achieve 500 gigawatt of installed electricity capacity from non-fossil fuel sources by 2030, which is in line with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement at the COP26 climate conference. Our next speaker is Mr. Sumant Sinha. Mr. Sinha is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Renewable, one of the India's leading clean energy companies with an aggregate portfolio of 10 gigawatt spread over more than 110 sites. Sumant holds various leadership positions nationally and internationally, and has been recognized as an SDG pioneer by the United Nations Global Compact in 2021. Our next speaker, Mr. Devarajan Nambakam. Dev is the Managing Director in the Investment Banking Division of Goldman Sachs in India, covering clients across natural resources, healthcare, and industrial sectors. He has been a member of Mumbai Investment Banking Division team since 2010. He joined Goldman Sachs Global Natural Resources team in London in 2006 and was named as Managing Director in 2017. Our next speaker, Mr. Amit Thawani. Amit is the founding member and Managing Director of Nomura India, where he leads the strategy and growth for Nomura Investment Banking in India. He has extensive experience in investment banking and corporate finance and has led numerous transactions with a strong focus on financial institutions, real estate industries, and infrastructure development. He is also a regular guest speaker at IIM and other leading business schools in India. Finally, our moderator of this session, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Shekhar Gupta is founder and editor-in-chief of The Print, India's fastest growing digital news platform. He is a prolific columnist, with his highly influential weekly column, National Interest, which is translated into 5 languages. He hosts Off the Cuff, an offering from the print, which sees him in conversation with an eminent guest twice a month. His daily YouTube show, Cut the Clutter, and until recently, he has also hosted Walk the Talk on NDTV 24/7 every week. In his 4-decade career, Shekhar has reported on key Indian and international events, from Indian Operation Blue Star to fall of the Berlin Wall, including many others. Shekhar is also a recipient of the Padma Bhushan, the 3rd highest civilian award in the Republic of India. Welcome, sir. Welcome, everyone. And over to you now. Shekhar, sir.
Well, thank you very much. And my apologies to all of you for that rather longish introduction that he chose for me. That's the fault of my office. But you know what happens these days? That we journalists get so much abuse that when somebody gives you compliments, you say thank you very much and accept them. So thank you very much. I have very little to report on my CV compared to the panelists today, beginning with Mr. Singh. The format we'll follow is that we'll give, each one of you has 30 seconds to make an opening statement. Okay, not 30 seconds, we'll up it by 4 times. So each one of you say something in introduction to your point on the subject in about 2 minutes. This is the Harvard, and you know they do everything flawlessly and to time, as we've seen already. And then maybe I will start with a couple of questions to the minister, and then we'll get everybody involved in conversation. The way it goes is that at 45 minutes after starting, we have a hard stop when audience questions start coming in. Those will be filtered and sent to me, and I will then be putting those up. So please go ahead, and we can go in any direction. But you know what? At the print also we say because politics matters, right? Because politics in a democracy, everything comes from politics. So the minister first.
Thank you, Shekhar. Ladies and gentlemen, in India, we've brought about a sea change in the energy sector in the past 5-7 years, ever since the government came to power. We've transformed our country from energy deficit to energy surplus. Now we export power to our neighboring countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, etc. We've converted the whole country into one market by connecting the whole country into one grid. We added 161,000 circuit kilometers in the past 5 years. And now the whole country is one grid running on one frequency, perhaps the largest integrated grid in the world. China is larger, but they have probably some bits and pieces here and there. We have strengthened the distribution system. The overall situation is this, that in 2015, the average availability of power in the rural areas was about 12 hours. Today, it's 21 hours. I'm talking about rural areas. In urban areas, it was about 18 hours. Today, it is 23 hours. We spent about 2,000 crores in the past 4 or 5 years, just helping the states to strengthen their distribution systems so that this became possible. We constructed about 2,870 new substations, upgraded about 3,800 odd substations, on the 565,000 circuit kilometers LT lines, etc., etc. So we as was said during my introduction, we connected every village and every hamlet, and we connected every home. We connected 2.83 crore homes. In million terms, it is 28.3 million homes in just about 18-19 months. The International Energy Agency called this the fastest and the largest expansion of access anywhere in the world in the history of electricity. So that is access, universal. The availability, universal. And one more thing, and the main thing, is that in energy transition also we have emerged as a world leader. We had, pledged in COP21 in Paris that by 2030, 40% of our established power generation capacity will come from non-fossil fuel sources. We achieved that in November 21, 9 years ahead of schedule. Talking of COP21, we are the only major economy only major economy and the only G20 country whose actions are consonant with a sub 2-degree rise in global temperature. Mind you, despite the fact that our per capita emissions are 1/3 of the world average, despite that, we are the only major economy whose actions are consonant with a sub 2-degree rise in global temperature. We had pledged that by 2030, we shall reduce the emissions intensity for our economy by 33%. In 2020, when we measured it, we had already reduced it by 28%. And we will cross 33%. In fact, we have upped our ambition in COP26 from 33% to 45%. Now we aim to reduce the emissions intensity, that means decoupling emissions from our GDP growth, by 45% by 2030. That's huge. We've upped our non-fossil fuel, renewable energy and non-fossil fuel capacity from 175 gigawatts to 500 gigawatts by 2030. 500 gigawatts. That's again huge. We already have the largest bids out in the world on storage, energy storage. You can't have energy transition without energy storage. Now you have the developed countries talking about energy transition, but you know the largest size of storage which exists, it's in California, 230 megawatts. My one bid from Ministry of Power is for 1,000 megawatt hours. And I have 3 other bids from the power major NTPC for 3,000 megawatt hours. That's because our country is huge and we need, huge quantities. Similarly, our first bids in hydrogen will require about 8,800 megawatts of electrolyzers. That electrolyzer manufacturing capacity has to be constructed because it does not exist. So that's the position. We are, as I said, we are a world leader in energy transition as well. Thank you. I think I have probably overshot my 1 minute and 20 seconds. So I'll stop here. Other things I'll give him my answers.
Yes, absolutely. And Sumant, if we can come to you next, because you are somebody, since a lot of this opening statement was about sustainable energy and moving to renewables, and you are doing it yourself. क्या बोलते हैं? Unless you die, you can't go to heaven. आप ना मरिए, स्वर्ग ना देखिए. So आप तो स्वर्ग देख रहे हैं इस समय.
Yeah, thank you, Shekhar. And I'd like to thank the Harvard students for inviting me to this session. It's an honor to be here. It's actually very interesting to speak after Minister Singh, because he's truly talked about the scale of the change that is upon us as far as the energy transition is concerned. And there are 2 different transitions that are happening right now. One is the decarbonization of electricity, and the second is the electrification of energy, right? And in both of those areas, if you actually couple the 2 together, along with India's massive growth in energy demand, it's an incredibly exciting place, therefore, to be in India at this point and dealing in this sector. And I'm really quite fortunate. I think that I got into the sector many years ago, and now we've built a company that hopefully can take advantage of and contribute to a lot of the efforts and activities that have to be undertaken. But let me just add a little bit more to what Minister Singh has just said. At this point in time, India's renewable energy targets, which are 500 gigawatts by 2030, is probably, leave aside China, is probably the biggest in the world. And that big market that is being created or has been created is allowing us to do a number of different things. Number one, it's getting a lot of people interested across the world and in India to come into our sector. The scale is allowing us to make large investments across the entire value chain, including in manufacturing, and allowing us to decrease costs in a way that we're becoming truly competitive with the earlier fossil fuel industry, and hopefully eventually will also become competitive in the rest of the world. And over time, you can probably see the emergence of Indian global champions that will come out of this, come out of India. At this point, of course, the Indian market itself is growing so rapidly that we have our hands full of just trying to meet the opportunities in India. But eventually, as the full ecosystem gets developed, you will see exports happening out of India, both in terms of business models and in terms of equipment. So I would say this is a very exciting time at this point in time. In addition, there are lots of other changes that are happening as well. And 2, I'd like to point out. One is there are policy changes that are happening. As Minister Singh talked about green hydrogen, that is going to be a huge enabler to making India eventually fossil free and not dependent on imports of energy. So I think that's a very big step forward. And then there are, of course, policy changes happening around batteries, how to incorporate batteries and so on into the grid. So that's the other sort of big area that is being looked at. Then there are massive technology changes that are happening as well. And so, with the cost of all the technologies coming down so dramatically, it's changing business models very rapidly and doing so over time. And so for us as companies operating in the sector, it's, just to summarize, it's a big sector. There's lots of opportunities here. India is a terrific market because it's growing rapidly. Policy making is relatively enlightened, I think, in terms of what needs to be done. Minister Singh talked about all the targets that have been set. So the government is taking a view that we want to be a leader in this area. And that therefore is throwing up a lot of opportunities for growth. So let me just stop here.
Amit, now, you raise the money for all this?
Thanks, Shekhar. Thank you very much for the Harvard students to inviting me here. I'll probably, and Sumant would surely recollect this, I've been doing deals in the sector for the last, call it 15 years. The last 7 years or 7-8 years have been a massive change. Honestly, sitting back, thinking back about 7-8 years back, I never thought we would make these kind of massive changes in this sector. It was a sector mired by challenges. It was a sector which had a lot of issues from both, the type of people who were operating in the sector and the policy framework, and whatever. There were too many challenges in the space. But the speed and the change that has happened over the last, call it 6, 7, 8 years has been unprecedented. Nobody could have imagined other than Honorable Prime Minister and the power ministers that we could actually achieve these kind of targets which was set in the last 7-8 years. And we've been actually part of a number of these transactions that have happened over the years. As you would imagine, any sector which was opening up had initially a bunch of players who entered into the space. Some were, wanting to make a quick buck, and that era is over. We now have very seasoned companies like Renewable and some of the others who are, who achieve massive scale, and they are growing at a very, very fast pace. Frankly, in India, infrastructure can be seen as a which normally infrastructure is never seen as a high growth industry in most parts of the world. So I think the message we carry to the world is India is a massive opportunity when it comes to anything to do with energy transition, and whether it's on the equipment side, whether it's on the actual power production side, and importantly, a lot of sort of transparency and easy framework to operate.
Dev, also give us an idea of which aspect of this industry do you deal with, or which is the one that interests you? You are money people, I know.
Sure. No, thank you, Shekhar. It's a pleasure to be here. And sharing a panel with Minister Singh ji, Shekhar ji, with industry leaders like Sumant, with whom I've had the pleasure of personally working over several years. Of course, my industry colleagues like Amit. I've been in banking over a decade and a half, and coincidentally, I started my banking career in London doing energy and utilities. I spent about 3.5-4 years doing that, and now I've been in India for over a decade. The reason I mention that is I've had the pleasure of doing what I do today for the last 15 years in 2 different geographies in the same sector over a very long period of time. And I think the one thing which the panelists have already mentioned, there has been a significant change, even in India. When I moved here and I started doing M&A and cross-border M&A particularly, there was a lot more mind space and focus for investors on traditional fossil fuel energy, conventional energy. In the last half a decade, that has been completely reversed. I agree with everything that's been said, that the focus of global investors is entirely on new energy and renewables. To your question, Shekhar, on what aspect I focus on, we spend a lot of time on M&A as well as capital raising for the sector. That can take several shapes and forms. It can be capital in the form of FDI. It can be pure financial investment, which comes in the form of equity. It can be debt, which comes from offshore. Companies like Renew have been extremely successful in raising offshore debt. And it can be debt which comes onshore. The reason I mention that is today, if I look at what the sector is doing, the heavy lifting, which is actually being done by Mr. Singh and people like Sumant, the limited role that we play, but we would like to think we need to do it well for all of this to come together, is to make that significant opportunity meet with the capital that it requires. And the reality of it is there is a huge amount of capital available globally to want to tap into this opportunity. Thinking a little bit forward over the next decade, given the ambitions as a country that we have, if there is one thing that we can all collectively achieve, it is to convince this global investor universe that while we as a country are, at least in a good chunk of all of this, in nascent stages, investors love tried and tested, right? That gives them more comfort than anything else. But in any industry, when you're in the nascent phase, when you're in the beginning, it is on us to convince investors that this will make economic sense for them in the long term. And if we do that well, and that starts all the way with Minister Singh's office putting the right policy initiatives in place, people like Sumant putting the work and the teams on the ground to make it happen. Hopefully people like Amit and us raise the capital from outside to make it happen. All of this comes together. And in a decade, if each of this constituent serves its responsibility well, we should have hopefully achieved the target. So looking forward, I think what's on us is to convince investors that in India, this is a scalable opportunity. It will become affordable for customers. And if both of those come together, absolutely, they're going to make money from this.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody, with being so disciplined with time. Mr. Singh, let me ask you a Harvard question first, which means a question given to me by Harvard. Maybe I don't quite have the equipment to think that far. So the question is, India leapfrog from pagers to mobile phones, from speed post to internet in no time. In power sector, what will that jump be? What will it look like? Are you visualizing anything? Are you promising anything?
Shekhar, it's already happening in front of you. We've already emerged as a leader in energy transition. We have the fastest rate of growth of renewable energy capacity in the world, and that is going to continue. We are going to be world leaders in hydrogen. As I said, some capacity has already been set up. We are going to, come out bids with humongous bids for green hydrogen. Again, that's the world leader. That's not happening anywhere else. We aim to be exporters for green hydrogen. Incidentally, Bloomberg, sort of categorized us as the most attractive destination for investment in renewables in the world. So we have almost every major fund invested here through different companies, whether it is Sumant's company or whether there are n number of companies. And our companies are now also going to the Middle East and setting up projects there. So we are growing. It is natural. Our demand is growing. Last month, my demand in energy terms grew by 8.7%. And that's huge if you talk about a huge country like India, 8.7%. And it will continue to grow because we have added 28.3 million consumers, and our industrial growth this year is 9.2% up to date now, which is the fastest rate of growth in all major economies in the world. We are going to be the largest manufacturing the destination for storage. We had a bid for storage, and I think that bid totaled up to almost 113 gigawatt hours, and that's bigger than anywhere else. I don't know about China, but that China is a bit closed. But apart from that, that's bigger than anywhere else. And similarly, all across the value chain, we are constructing pumped hydro. Apart from this, the battery storage, renewable energy, of course, offshore is our next project. and every bid is fully, is hotly contested. Sumant will tell you. There's a key, huge competition. We are growing, we'll continue growing, and we'll continue leading the world in energy transition. As I said, we are the only major economy whose actions are consistent with a sub 2-degree rise in temperature. Just take one scheme. We started changing all our lighting to LED, and that has resulted in a reduction of CO2 emissions by 113 million tons of CO2 per annum. Just one scheme. We have a scheme called Perform, Achieve, Trade for Industry, whereby we set targets for the industry for increasing their efficiency and reducing their emissions. And only its third cycle, it has led to a reduction of CO2 emissions by 103 million tons per annum. We have a scheme for appliances, star rating scheme for appliances. That has resulted in a reduction of CO2 emissions by 53 million tons of CO2 per annum. As I said, we shall reach 45% of emissions reduction by 2030. We are a world leader. We shall continue to be world leaders. Thank you.
So we have two.
Yes.
Sir,
carry on.
So we have two members.
Yeah.
We have two members on the panel who raised the money. We have one who spent some money, that is Sumant. And you said in your opening remarks how much money the center paid up to basically repair the utilities in the states, that is distribution companies in the states. Now, how long will it be before they are all broken again? Because, as we keep saying, because politics matters, even in the election campaign that's going on, every party is promising free power. Some are promising limited free power, some are promising total free power. In one state, the incumbent chief minister has personally burnt the power bills while waiving them and also torn them. Now, there's a promise of 5 years of no charges for power in India's largest state. So how long will it be before these companies get broken again, these distribution companies get broken again? What is there to enforce discipline?
Very valid question, Shekhar, and that is the challenge before me today. But I'm meeting it in a number of ways. One is, you see, most of the pledges are for, the free power for agriculture. And, that is one aspect which I'm meeting in one way. And I will give you the overall context first. Now, the overall context is that state governments have been announcing subsidies, and many of the state governments do not pay up. You announce a subsidy, then you don't want the consumers to pay, or you want the consumers to pay less than they should be paying, then you should pay. You means not even person from the budget, the state budget, you should pay the difference. Now there's a shortfall. The shortfall at the last count was 72,000 crores. So that is one. The other is that the tariffs are in many states or many distribution companies, government-owned distribution companies, not cost reflective. That's the second reason for the losses. And now, of course, you have competitive politics. We are a huge, rumbustious democracy. We are proud of it. It's rumbustious, but it is a democracy, which is very alive. Now, that has costs. And this, what Shekhar pointed out, has a cost. Now, the solution to that, which I have evolved, is in stages. First, they used to finance this, the losses, in a number of ways. One way was keeping the bills of the GenCos pending. So now I have provided that before power is dispatched, you will give a letter of credit. That is stage one. The second way they used to finance it was by taking loans from Power Finance Corporation or the REC, which are non-banking financing agencies. So we've changed the prudential norms, and we have said that any distribution company which is making losses will not be able to access funds from these organizations unless they they give us a trajectory for loss reduction, get their state's commitment to it, signed by the cabinet, and file it with the ministry. Otherwise, that financing won't happen. And we have circulated these revised prudential norms to the Indian Banking Association. So now the commercial banks are also refusing loans to such companies. The third thing which we have done is that we carried out a revamp of the distribution scheme. Actually, it was not, putting money into the discoms. It was helping them to strengthen their distribution scheme by constructing substations, changing conductors, etc. We've come up with that fixed most of the gaps in distribution, but we've come up with another scheme for modernization of the system. Now, we have said that you won't be able to access funds under this unless, again, if you are loss making, you work out a trajectory for loss reduction and get your state's commitment to it. Because of COVID, we've provided for additional financing, additional borrowing windows for the states over and above the FRBM limits. Now, that additional financing is also contingent on their undertaking these steps for loss reduction. And finally, you see, what I am doing is that I am going to join cause and effect there. So now, if you don't pay for the power which you draw, the power will switch off automatically. That's what I am providing, and you will not be able to replace it with any other power. What politicians understand most is they don't understand profit and loss, and that doesn't bite them. But if the light switches off in their state, that bites them. So that is what is going to happen. I have told all the states that this is what is going to happen. Next time you keep any power bill pending, I mean, you can give all the subsidy you want. If you want to give power free to everybody, go right ahead and do it. But you must pay for the power which you buy from the generation companies. You don't do that, the power will switch off. And that, I think, should take care of things.
So, Sumant,
longest answer?
Yes. Sumant, are you getting paid for the power you produce, or you still have to wait for years? And
I think there is a difference in the sector over the last 3 years. And I'll tell you what happened. So the government introduced an entity called the Solar Energy Corporation of India. And that now is doing all the new bids. And therefore, for all the new bids that we're doing, we're getting paid through SECI on time. Now, the issue is, of course, in the projects where we had direct PPAs with the distribution utilities, there the problem is persisting. Unfortunately, most states are treating their discoms as ATM machines. And as you said, they make a lot of promises and so on. And they are not, able to pay their subsidies to the utilities on time, and therefore the utilities then pass that pressure back to us. Now, this is a pretty acute problem. It sort of has gone up and down over the years, as we all know. I think the government is now trying to redress them by fundamentally improving the operating efficiency of the utilities. But I would say that political issues continue to persist, and I think the ultimate solution is, as Minister Singh said, that you have to ultimately shut off power to them, or which we can't do as renewable energy companies. So we have to potentially curtail their access to the exchanges and thereby try to put pressure on them. But some pressure has to be brought on them to make sure that they continue to pay on time, which they very often, as you know, don't do at this point.
Dave, so when you bring investors into Indian energy sector, what are the positives, briefly, one or two, the top positives that you tell them? I know that scale will be one. And what are the risks? And how much of a risk is politics?
Sure. No, I think it's a great question, and I'll try to keep it very simple, but I think the scale is the more obvious point, like you mentioned. But within that, Shekhar, I think scale, which is going to be coupled with true economics. I think, what I'm trying to say is it's not just about the sheer quantum of dollars that they can invest in India. The reality of it is, if they put the money to work in India and have the patience to reap the benefit of that investment over a period of time. The reason I say that is, by definition, the sector as such, especially for a high growth sector, you can never measure success at a point in time. It has to be measured over a period of time. So the way we position this to investors, which I truly believe as a banker, and which is true, we all believe that, is there is significant value to be created in this sector if the investors have the ability to understand, invest, and be patient and reap the benefits of it over a period of time. So when we talk to investors, not only do we highlight the scale, but we also highlight that these are significantly return generating investments as long as they have the right time horizon and risk reward profile in mind. The reason I ended the positive with risk reward profile. You asked about the challenges. This isn't specific to renewables or new energy alone. It's probably broadly true for infrastructure. Historically, investors' biggest concern has been the intent is there, the policy initiative is there. The pathway for that initiative to translate into ease of doing business, that ease of doing business to translate into profits, that profits to translate into returns. It sounds very simple. I'm oversimplifying it, and that isn't always easy. Along the way, the number of stakeholders is massive. Everyone has the challenges, mouths to feed, stakeholders to take care of. So the single biggest challenge for an investor is understanding how that starting point of the good initiative is going to make its way through the companies and the various channels, various parts of the value chain to have the first dollar going in result in the dollar coming out into their hands, which is a pretty long life cycle. And that remains the risk. I mean, we talked about the Discom Health. That is a good example of, and I agree with Sumant. I think the single biggest change which has actually changed investors' perspective, and we can see the way they perceive the risk to be lower when they are looking at a SECI project versus a state Discom project. So it's things like that which investors need to see, that risks along the way are getting mitigated, and the intent with which we started is actually going to fructify and make money for them. That does remain a challenge, and it will, I won't call it so much a challenge, but an ongoing exercise. It's something that we need to keep investors convinced that is going to happen.
Amit, if you could also speak a little bit from your experience of some power deals that you have done. You can talk about one odd where somebody got very good results, and maybe one odd where somebody did not get such good results, and the lessons that we learn from those.
Thanks, Shekhar. I think there are a number of deals now, and that's why I meant, over the years. Now there are a number of large companies like Sumant's company, Renew, or some of the others that have got created, which are operating, multiple gigawatt projects, and where investors have made returns. So Renew is a classic example. Azure is a classic example, where investors have made very healthy returns from the time that they invested. But I would echo Dev's point of view that, when you're entering a sort of a new market in some ways, you got to have the right framework. And the right framework is not just the policy framework. You need to have the right operator whom you're backing. That is the most important, because all about execution at the end of it. And secondly, you need to have the right time horizon. I mean, this is infrastructure. It takes its course of time. There will be, a number of stakeholder elements which have to be taken care of. So I think investors have also realized, and now it's not about anymore, selling just a dream story. We have a lot of high quality examples where companies have returned capital to investors, where people have made returns. I mean, another example is a company which Sumant bought from Actis a few years back, where Actis as an investor made a fair amount of returns. So you asked me examples of people making returns. There are a number of those examples, and let's not forget, this is a 7-8 year story. So we're still young in this sort of journey. I think there is. I'm very positive note. So I don't want to talk about there are accidents. There have been accidents, but that's part of the journey.
Mr. Singh,
Shekhar, yeah, I wanted to come in.
Sir.
In fact, I must point out a couple of things. One is that apart from one particular example, that Andhra Pradesh, when that new government came in, there were not many other examples where the state governments, sort of go against contracts. We made it clear to them that the contracts are sacrosanct. We provided for payment security mechanisms. I don't see any company in the renewable energy space which has made losses. I don't see any company. You see, the gestation period in renewable energy is less than that of conventional energy. For example, you can set up a gigawatt scale solar plant, maybe 12, 14 months. We give 18 months. Now we've made it 24 months. Bar, COVID, etc. That's it. 18 months you can set up a giga scale solar plant, and you sign a PPA, and the money starts flowing. The money starts flowing as soon as you sign the PSA. You start supplying power. The money starts flowing. Another thing about renewables is that we have made it a must run. So whatever you generate has to be purchased. That's it. And actually, it's not a 7-year story. It's a 5-year story, shall we say. So we started growing rapidly after 2017.
17, yeah.
Thereafter, we really pressed the accelerator and we started off. And the number of changes we have brought about in the rules so as to make doing business easier is nobody's business. We've transformed the the regulatory framework by coming out with rules, guidelines, etc., to expand the market and to ensure ease of doing business. And we are still at it. So the way we have changed the regulatory landscape is again nobody's business. We've changed it, and that is why we have this progress.
So
in the past 5 years, we brought in energy into the energy sector.
So,
totally.
Shekhar, if I can just make one remark,
Sure,
sorry, if you don't mind. Just one remark. I think Sumant had mentioned about SECI and the sort of massive change that has happened in terms of collection cycle. I can tell you in some of the recent deals that have happened or are happening, the valuation multiples for portfolios which are SECI dependent has gone up. So there is very clearly investors realizing that collection issues are limited. The valuation multiples are going up in that context. So there is going to be return creation happening through these changes that are that are underway.
Yes, that's a good point. Mr. Singh, we've been talking about renewables, and you mentioned the targets: 175 gigawatts by 22, 500 by 2030. Where are we with these targets right now?
Currently, Shekhar, the status is that we have established 159,000 megawatts, 159 gigawatts already established of non-fossil fuel capacity. And we have another about 69,000 megawatts under installation. So if you talk about the capacity which is installed and which is under installation, it is almost 200 and whatever, 159 plus,
69, 218, yes.
218 gigawatts established or under installation. And plus we have about almost 20,000 megawatts under bid around the country. So our pace of this, now this is despite 2 years of COVID, which saw lockdowns of varying degrees. And despite the lockdown, many projects continued working. The brave entrepreneurs continued progress on their work. So even though we gave time, we gave extensions of time. But now we see, hopefully, this pandemic transforming into an endemic. If that happens, then our pace will go up again. It will go up again. So I'm sanguine about achieving, short point is I'm sanguine about achieving 500 gigawatts. I have, in fact, less than 300 gigawatts to go. 218, that means we have another 272 to go, 282 to go.
Actually, my mental math continues to be poor. So 159 plus 69 actually is 228, not 218.
There you are.
10 gigawatts. I can't steal 10 gigawatts from you.
Yes.
So 228. Now
272 left.
Yeah. So now let me take you to the other end of the spectrum, which is coal. I mean, anytime we start to write the epitaph of coal, it comes back and we have to repeat that old famous headline, King Coal is back on the throne. Now we've seen this maramari over coal over the past 6-8 months in China, India, everywhere. I mean, what's the future of coal?
Now, the way we have calculated it is that currently the fossil fuel generation, which includes coal and gas. Incidentally, some developed countries are trying to get gas classified as green energy. I mean, how funny, how ridiculous can you get? You burn gas, you get carbon dioxide. So it is totally fossil. So you take fossil fuel, it's currently 80%. Now 2030, it will be 35%. Is that good enough?
No,
I
that's
think
good
it's good enough for the world. Absolutely. And you take fossil fuel. Again, you take gas, etc. I think all the developed world also has similar percentages.
Yeah.
And in fact, the 40% of non-fossil fuel capacity is good. It's very credible if you compare us with the developed countries. Yeah.
So does any of the others have a view on coal?
Other meaning?
Any of the other panelists has a view on coal?
No view as such, other than a data point which pretty much corroborates what you're saying, Shekhar, which is if you look at over the last 10.5 years, I think the FDI which came into the power sector, over $10 billion in renewables, next to nothing in coal. And then as Mr. Singh said, within petroleum and natural gas, probably over $7 billion, of which I would like to think a bulk of it towards gas. So I think the point in all of this being, while we cannot, given the sheer scale of what coal contributes today, that's not going to go away. But given the sheer quantum of opportunity on the renewable side, and for sure the capital that is chasing the renewables and not coal, that is going to result in this shift. So it's not just about the policy wanting to make it happen. At the end of the day, the capital has to chase that as well. And the capital is definitely chasing green energy and not coal today. Global capital for sure.
Correct. If you permit, I'd like to just add one more point. See, the thing is that for phasing out coal, storage has to work. Otherwise, the renewable energy is intermittent. You don't get sunlight after dusk, so the solar is out. Wind blows sometimes, does not blow sometimes. So if you want to turn over entirely to non-fossil, you will have to have storage being viable. You can add a nuclear, but there's a limit to how much you can add nuclear because of the storage of storage of waste is an issue. Now, these I'm again sorry to say that the developed countries have been showing concern about the environment for so many decades. They have done nothing. Zilk. I mean, some people walked out of Kyoto. I mean, none of them are remotely close to adhering to what they pledged in Paris. Some people walked out of Paris as well. Not only that, you see, what I feel bitter about is that, for example, now that we have decided that, yes, we want energy transition, storage. As I said, the biggest storage capacity is 230 megawatts. I mean, that's nothing, that's nil. So the cost of storage today in rupee terms, I mean, you can translate it to US dollar cents, is 4 rupees 18 paise per kilowatt hour. Now, if I add storage, which I'm going to do, the cost of my power will double for the consumer. And many of my consumers are not very well off. But again, so to add storage, we'll have to give VGF. So as to bring the price of storage down. But if they had, the developed world, which has been talking about environment and doing nothing, if they had started adding storage, let's say 5 years back, today the price of storage would have been 2 rupees per kilowatt hour, which would have been affordable. So now I am adding volumes. I'm not waiting for other people to add volumes. As I said, we already have about 4,000 megawatt hours of bid on the annual. That's the largest in the world. So unless you add volumes, the prices won't come down. So it's a challenge which we have to face. Similarly about hydrogen. Yes.
Yeah, Shekhar, if I
Sumant, how long for coal to become like speed post?
Coal to become?
like snail mail, in the sense
Like?
that, like snail mail, like
Oh, gone.
पुराने ज़माने की डाक-
Acha, that gone. Nahi,
Outdated,
Shekhar,
yes.
outdated. That will depend on how fast the price of storage comes down. Now, our calculation is that even with all the VGF, etc., we give by 2030, we still will have 266 gigawatts of fossil fuel capacity out of 820 gigawatts. 820 gigawatts will be what our capacity will be. So the coal would be about 260, which is how much? I mean, again, you can calculate whatever.
It's more than
If I
one,
may just-
just over 1/4, yes.
Just more than
over
one. Yeah. Yeah.
Shekhar, if I may just add
All
to
right.
that, I think
Yeah.
I think technology is evolving very rapidly, and the cost of renewable energy is obviously much cheaper than coal-based power. So as we have incremental demand growth, most of that is going to be met now from renewable energy sources. Now, a lot depends on how we are able to combine wind and solar together, along with some degree of storage, to form these round-the-clock power solutions, which are almost like baseload power and much cheaper than coal-based power. So those are solutions that are already becoming viable, and over time, storage can increase as the cost of storage comes down. So I think eventually you'll be able to replace coal almost entirely with renewables, and I think the technology-based solution, it will be available economically in the next, literally, it's already there right now. So the real question is, how rapidly can we deploy renewable energy capacity? If we can deploy it faster, we can phase coal out faster. But the problem is that there is a sheer limitation to how much capacity you can set up, because you have to build transmission lines. You have to do some demand shaping as well, because if you can shape demand to align with your supply side, then that will make the requirement of coal a little bit less. So I think it depends on all of that, but I think this is work in progress. And if you ask me, by 2030, coal will have certainly seen you definitely would have passed peak coal, and it will certainly be on the decline at that point in time. And give it another 10 years at max after that, I don't think you'll see coal anymore beyond that point.
Well, now we've been talking about coal for some time, and our first question from the audience is also about coal. So I know that we've covered some of the ground, but this is Harvard audience, and it's again a question which is intelligent, because I can't understand this. There's something technical there. It says, what strategy is India adopting to abate coal power from plants that don't use carbon capture technology? Who's taking this?
This, I'll take this. I am responsible after all. I'll take this.
Yeah.
You see, the thing is that, again, you see, and this is what I told Kerry when he visited us, and we discussed, and this is what I told Alok also when he visited me, and I told him that, look, if people have been talking about energy, sort of energy transition, and need for protecting the environment and net zero and things like that, you don't have any commercial scale carbon capture project in the developed world at all. You just have some pilot projects. I also have started a pilot project in our NTPC plant. So we are almost at par. Now, so CCU is working in pilot projects. It's not commercial scale as yet. We are working. We have started our own pilots. Some pilots have been conducted, I believe, in the United States, but that has to grow into commercial scale and become commercially viable. Generally, unless and until a technology is commercially viable, it will not catch on, because the costs will be too much. You see, what the developed world pledge about $100 billion a year is a chimera. I mean, all that we have has come is about $10 billion a year approximately for the financing energy transition. But we are working at it. As I said, I mean, we are too big. We don't need the. I mean, we have the finances. We'll finance it. So we are working on carbon capture as well. We are also working on coal gasification, but that also will remain fossil fuel. What Sumant said is actually the key. If the price of storage comes down, then the transition will be much faster. We are trying to bring the price of storage down by adding storage. As I said, we have the largest grids in the world. Apart from that, I'm going to put a mandate. You see, in fact, it's going to come out very soon for storage as well. So we put mandates for buying renewable energy on distribution companies. We call it obligated entities. And now the fresh mandate which is coming out will have mandates for renewable energy capacity and also for storage. So now what we have calculated is that if we want to add 500 gigawatts, that means another about 270 gigawatts to the grid, we will need about 108 gigawatt hours of storage. And that is only battery storage. Apart from that, I'll need another about 60 gigawatt hours from pumped hydro. Now that I'm mandating, that will lead to more costs. That will lead to a slightly power being slightly higher. We'll try to reduce the cost by VGF, but that is how we are going about it. Yeah.
Can one of you explain technically what does carbon capture mean? Because not all of us are experts. We all pretend to be experts, most of all us journalists. But what does carbon capture mean? And what does it imply? And why is it so complicated, so challenging? Sumant, you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think when you burn coal, you obviously emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, right? And that's the fundamental problem, the problem gas. So carbon capture essentially means that you capture this carbon dioxide and essentially store it in some way, shape, or form and prevent it from getting into the atmosphere. Now, these technologies are still not at all commercially viable, and they have not really been deployed at any kind of scale. And a lot of coal companies talk about it, but it's not clear that there is a commercially viable solution for carbon capture. But the thing is that eventually, if we want to get to net zero, now you don't get to net zero by stopping the emission of carbon. You will continue to emit carbon in certain parts of economic activity. So therefore, being able to actually do this viably, commercially viably and technically viably, I think is actually very critical. So over the next 10 to 20 years, at some point, we'll have to have this development of this technology, because without that, it's going to be very hard to get to net zero, because you just simply cannot convert everything into carbon-free activities. You will continue to, whether you burn it for mobility, whether you burn it for cooking, whether you burn it for, generating power, somewhere or the other, you'll be burning carbon in some way, shape, or form.
Well, that's interesting. I learned something new. Now, a second question from the audience. Can you talk more about value drivers, that is research, skilling, and employment in the field of renewable energy? How can we make an impact on the world in the sector of green mobility and renewable power? Who will take it? Mr. Singh,
Shekhar?
go ahead.
Yeah, what I understand is, how can you combine renewable energy with mobility? Is that the substance of the question? Can you repeat it, please?
It says value drivers for research, skilling, employment. Because as I see it, renewable energy will now be a huge employment generator, right? And there'll be employment in research. A lot of new skills will need to be learned. So, yeah. Can you talk more about value drivers, that is research, skilling, and employment in the field of renewable energy? And then the question is, how we can make an impact on the world in the sector of green mobility and renewable power. So I think one leads from the other.
Yeah. Now, as far as this expansion, this energy transition is concerned, it will create new jobs. It will also phase out old jobs, as happens in any technology change. So will happen here. Now, the new jobs are being created. We have a training program. We have a skilling program for skilling people for these new jobs. Now, the employment intensity of renewable energy is slightly less than that of conventional energy, slightly less than that of coal. But that is the price, again, another price which has to be paid. Profitability, renewable energy is profitable. The gestation period is low. I mean, you get it up and going in max 18, 20 months. And then it doesn't have any recurring cost apart from cleaning the panel or, servicing the turbine, wind turbine, etc. So the recurring costs are less. The tariff in real terms declines over time because you sign a PPA at in a particular year, and that remains fixed for 25 years. So in actual terms, in net present value terms, the tariff comes down. So it is very, very affordable. So it's good for the consumer as well because the cost of power is affordable, and it's less than that of conventional power, unless you add storage, in which case it will be right now slightly more than conventional, but hopefully with time it will come back to conventional. Now, basically what we want, we have started the electric mobility program. We are setting up charging stations at a rapid pace, and electrical mobility is picking up. Thank you. Now people are buying electric cars and electric scooters in India of their own volition. And that will grow as the price of storage battery comes down. The price of battery will come down because we have a PLI scheme, that means production linked incentive scheme for manufacturing batteries here. And it will be one of the largest capacities in the world. So the price of electrical mobility will come down, and we would prefer that electrical mobility should be from renewable energy. Now we already have we already have renewable energy as a part of our grid energy, because we have added so much of renewable energy capacity. That percentage of renewable energy is going to increase exponentially over time, and we see that as that proportion increases. Basically the electricity will become more and more green. Our ambition in short terms is to electrify the economy, green the electricity. So mobility is important, cooking is important. We will cover all that. And many people are now thinking of going for all green charging stations. So that also we have provided for. Yeah.
If I may,
If I can just add one thing.
Dave and Amit, you deal with many companies. Your investee companies, for example, how much of a challenge are they having finding skilled personnel for these new businesses? Any of you can talk about
I'll answer that, Shekhar. Maybe I'll take a slightly different example, especially on electric mobility. India has actually a unique opportunity not just to cater to the Indian market when it comes to sort of electric or green mobility, but our auto component players, they are high qualified engineered companies which are already existing in the country, and they have a unique opportunity which they're actually tapping now, because India's biggest strength in some ways is software, and electric mobility has a lot of elements of engineering software. And when you combine the hardware along with software, India auto component sector, while it's not straight away green energy, but very closely linked to it, can create massive sort of an impact. And it's already happening. Last year we listed a company called Star. It's been a massive success. And that's a company which has sort of pioneered in terms of reaching to the global markets by providing auto components to electric mobility players. So you are seeing those impact getting created, and the employment opportunities will, as Minister said, there will be certain old technology which will pave way for the new technology that's coming into the sector.
But if I may add to that also, Shekhar, as new manufacturing, for example, comes in, we are already hiring from a lot of other industries, and our sector is going to create millions of new jobs over the next several years. So I think it's going to be tremendous from that standpoint. Of course, skilling is an important aspect because we have to train all of our people in the new industry. But just to give an example, we are looking, we've hired, since we started as a company, about 2,000 people, direct jobs so far. We are setting up now a new solar manufacturing plant, and that itself is going to require at least 2,000 more people. And so we just, as manufacturing becomes part of the mix, you'll see job creation suddenly increasing quite tremendously in our sector. The other thing is R&D is very critical, because right now we're not doing enough R&D, and we need to increase that. Certainly. Okay,
Dave, I think we are coming to the close of the session, but go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I think Sumant and Amit and Mr. Singh covered it well. The only point I'll add is sheer volume of job creation. I think there is availability of skilled labor, but what we are seeing today is that upskilling in a job, upskilling in the role as we continue to evolve has become a huge part of defining the success of any company, because technology is evolving as we speak. We hire engineers, sorry, when I say we, companies hire engineers to do a certain job. As the technology evolves, it behooves them to make sure they are keeping pace with it. So the only point I would add is, apart from job creation, upskilling on the job will be a huge element of success, and that will probably be a big value driver for success going forward as well.
Well, that's fantastic.
Just one point. And this is important. You see, one more thing I would like to inform the audience about is that we are going to come out with a bid for almost about 45,000 megawatts of the advanced chemistry cell and module manufacturing in India from polysilicon onwards. We had an earlier bid. That bid got finalized at 8,780 megawatts of manufacturing capacity. We already had 15,000 megawatts manufacturing capacity from earlier. Now, this is going to be for 45,000 megawatts of manufacturing capacity from polysilicon to wafers, cells to modules, and it is all advanced chemistry. It's all, the efficiency, the minimum efficiency is going to be 22%. That's the floor I'm keeping. So it's only going to be advanced. So that's an investment opportunity of billions of dollars.
Well, I hope
coming soon.
All you guys move to trillions from billions. The best to all of you. This has been a great session for me also, because you know what happens in my life as a journalist. Every other day, whenever you think you know everything, you are surprised by how little you know in very important areas. So for me, this was a tutorial also. Thank you very much for being so generous and so disciplined, and the very best to you. I think now there'll be some housekeeping announcements and a vote of thanks. But before that, my vote of thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, this has been such an amazing panel. So it's my honor and privilege to thank all of you on behalf of the organizers of this conference, and in fact, all the students, all Indian students at Harvard. I'd like to start by thanking the Honorable Minister, Minister R.K. Singh ji. Thank you so much for such an elucidating talk. You've highlighted such immense opportunity areas in India, but most importantly, I keep coming back to the point that you mentioned, that India is the only large country which has a sub-2 degree energy transition plan. And I think that's something to be incredibly proud of and export to the rest of the world. Thank you so much. Shri Sumant Sinha ji, CEO of Renewable. Again, Mr. Sinha, a company that we are all very proud of. Thank you so much for sharing so many details of not only your accomplishment, but also the sector that is growing. Again, very much remember the first point that you made, that in India, not one, there are two transitions that we are simultaneously causing, the transition of electrification and of green energy. And I think that it's a big achievement that we are doing both very well. Next, I'd like to come to thank Mr. Amit Thawani, who's the MD of investments in Nomura. Amit ji, thank you so much for all your insightful points, especially the point that in India now investments in green energy is no longer a gamble. It's a proven investment. There is a track record. There are companies which have shown that it's a positive return possibility. So all other global investors on this call, please heed attention to this fact that it's something that has already happened. Mr. Nambakam from Goldman Sachs, I really appreciate both the challenges and the opportunities that you've highlighted for the global investors, and also your point on how now there is differentiation that's happening in India with SECI projects, non-SECI projects. It shows the maturity of the sector, that now you can come in and you can find the trends that suits your risk profile. Last but not the least, I'd very much like to thank Shri Shekhar Gupta ji, founder and chief editor of Print. Thank you so much for such an interesting session, provocative yet very informative moderating. I think you got the best out of our panelists, and I'll risk saying that this is probably the best session of this conference, even though there are many more to follow that I haven't seen. With that, I'll request all our panelists to drop off if you'd like, because now we'd just like to make an announcement of the next session. Thank you so much once again. I think a standing ovation is in order, but if you're online, for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
very much.
So for all our audience members, please do stay on. Now we have a next round of very interesting sessions that we are about to launch. So starting at 10 a.m. Indian time and 8:30 p.m. 10 a.m. US time and 8:30 p.m. India time, which is now, we have 3 parallel sessions that you can pick from. There is a session on creating global tech place from India, Indo-US partnerships, and then redefining feminism. These are parallel sessions, and then we have more later. For more details on all these upcoming sessions and to get links to attend each one of these, please do visit our website of the India conference. I really appreciate you being here. Your questions were very, very informative and very helpful. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.